For 11 years, they delivered punchlines and beverages. But you won't believe what came next. After suffering melancholy and leaving the program too soon, one star went from being America's sweetheart to becoming a total hermit. Another well-known figure managed to keep his marriage intact despite cheating on 3 women in one night. And the adored bartender who brought us weekly giggles nearly scrapped following a catastrophic scandal that would put a stop to professions today. Watch this video to find out who is doing well, who is having difficulties, and who we will always lose after 40 years. Dansen, Ted. For more than 10 years, Ted Dansen was Sam Malone, not simply the character he played. Every week, millions of people watched Cheers to see the flirtatious former ball star behind the bar, and more than 80 million people saw him shut down the event in 1993. Among the biggest TV finales ever was this one. But even as everyone applauded and laughed, Dansen was subtly becoming weary of it all. He was imprisoned by the same persona that made him renowned. He felt stuck, irritated, and ready to let go of the womanizing bar owner character behind the scenes. Dansen was going through a terrible time toward the conclusion of Cheers. He was 45. He had recently broken up with Whoopi Goldberg following their highly public romance, and his marriage had ended in a violent divorce. The Friars Club roast followed. The night he joked with Goldberg while wearing blackface. She supported him, but the criticism was severe and came right away. He was almost crushed by it. People had stopped laughing, rather he was called names and made fun of. He was haunted by that night for years, and it came to represent everything that had gone wrong. He subsequently acknowledged that at the time, he lacked emotional maturity. He said in an interview that he had lied in previous relationships. He made it apparent that he needed to change, but he did not name names. That marked the beginning of something novel: mentors, therapy, and in-depth introspection. It wasn't simple, however, it was successful. The man behind Sam Malone gradually changed into a completely different person. And in the most unexpected place, the water, that new Ted Dansen discovered meaning. When he brought his girls to the beach one day while he was living in Santa Monica, he noticed a sign that read, "No swimming, water polluted." That incident altered his life, and he was unable to convey it to them. What started out as uncertainty became a calling. From their basement, he and a friend started the American Oceans Campaign. One of the largest conservation organizations in the world, Oceana, was formed from what began as a modest organization. Dansen did more than simply provide his name. He researched the science, he discovered the truth, and he spread the news by using his celebrity. His message was straightforward. The seas are perishing, and everything else goes down with them if we don't take action right now. He battled on many fronts, from offshore drilling to plastic garbage to overfishing. He maintained that preserving the ocean will address issues beyond water. It might aid with climate protection, food production, and reducing the frequency of the calamities that occur more frequently each year. Dansen's advocacy was in the news once more by 2025. He marched for climate justice and placed his support behind progressive environmental measures like the Green New Deal. He showed up rather than only speaking out, and his urgency grew along with the flames, floods, and droughts. He cautioned that a world of pain, particularly for the weakest members of society, would await us if we didn't address this. But protest placards and politics weren't the only things in his life. A new golden era had quietly begun in his career. He once again received critical acclaim for his portrayal of a charming, complex demon-turned-hero in the good realm. Cheers was suddenly being referred to as a legend by younger admirers who had never even seen him. A man on the inside, his most recent Netflix series was another success, earning him another Golden Globe nomination and spending weeks in the top 10. He is scheduled to receive the Carol Burnett Award, one of the greatest accolades in television, in January 2025. Shelley Long. As Diane Chambers, the bookish waitress whose witty wit and boundless ambition became the center of attention, Shelley Long glowed on screen. She was different from the first episode. She spoke as though she were paraphrasing Shakespeare. She made you giggle, even though she carried herself as though she was in a lecture hall. The back and forth between Diane and Sam was the show's lifeblood for 5 seasons. Then all changed in 1987, when Shelley left right when the program was booming. The audience was in a state of shock. The authors were in a frenzy. Glenn Charles, the co-creator, acknowledged that some reviewers thought Cheers would not be able to continue without her. The move appeared daring, even foolish at the time. However, it made logic to Shelley. Hollywood had approached with offers for movies, and at the time, movies were seen as more prestigious than television. She had previously garnered critical acclaim for her role in Irreconcilable Differences and caused a stir in the money pit opposite Tom Hanks. She wanted more than simply to be a part of something amazing. She desired to develop, but desire was not all that was happening. Shelley had just given birth, and she didn't want her daughter Juliana to spend a lot of time on set. She made it apparent in interviews that spending time with her child was more important than producing a new season of 22 episodes. Cheers seemed to be repeating itself to her as well. Same tension, same story. She didn't want to phony it in since it was becoming stale, so she leaped. However, things had not always gone well behind the scenes. Conflicts of creativity occurred. Her on-screen colleague, Ted Dansen, subsequently admitted that they had conflict, but it was all business. Just two individuals with distinct working styles. Frasier, played by Kelsey Grammer, then began to receive additional lines. According to others, Shelley disliked that adjustment. The sensation was obvious, whether that was genuine or not. Her fame was waning. She subsequently described Cheers as one of the most fulfilling experiences of her life, although she departed on her own terms. Shelley's career took some strange turns after Cheers. Hello Again, which tells the story of a housewife who returns from the grave, was her first major motion picture following departing. She then portrayed a naive yet endearing scout leader in Troop Beverly Hills. Neither created much of an impression. Critics did not find it impressive. No one bit the audience. All of a sudden, leaving Cheers didn't seem like such a good idea. The Brady Bunch movie followed. All of a sudden, Shelley was Carol Brady, the ideal mother in an incomprehensible world. It was humorous and strange, and strangely sentimental, and it revitalized her career. She continued to play the part in TV spin-offs and sequels, and for a while it seemed like she had found her calling once more. Sitcoms also made an effort to re-engage her by offering wise counsel, but they were unsuccessful. In the midst of all of this, her private life subtly fell apart. She and Bruce Tyson divorced after almost 2 decades of marriage. In 2004, they got divorced. Shelley was stepping back from the limelight by that point. Her priorities had changed. She kept her head down, concentrated on her baby, and only participated in projects that genuinely piqued her interest. However, Shelley wasn't doing well behind the scenes. She was exhausted by the strain to prove herself following Cheers. Each disaster seemed like a public failure. The question appeared to be the same in every article. Did she make a bad decision? Weight like that wears you down. Her battles with depression became more difficult to conceal after her divorce. She withdrew farther. Sightings in public become infrequent. Because it had been so long, one of her photos made headlines when it was discovered in 2022. Shelley was a lot like Diane, Ted Dansen subsequently thought, intense, challenging, and brilliant. Perhaps that was the issue. It's difficult to move on when the character is so similar to you. She will be 75 by 2025, currently mainly retired. She occasionally appears in independent films or guest spots. In 2021, she played her final significant part in The Cleaner. Perlman, Rhea Perlman, had no intention of becoming a television star, but everything changed when she wore the waitress uniform and took the bar on Cheers. In her role as Carla Tortelli, she emerged as the show's fierce, sardonic protagonist. Rhea dominated the character from the first snarky phrase to the final episode. She wasn't only a supporting actor. Every sight was illuminated by her. Her honesty, fury, and comebacks were adored by the audience. The critics concurred. More than any other actress on the program, she received 10 Emmy nominations and won 4 of them. Later on, even NBC referred to Carla as one of the best TV characters ever. However, Rhea was still figuring things out before Cheers. She gained recognition for a little role on Taxi. She collaborated with Danny DeVito there, who would go on to marry her. Producers noticed something in her after that others had missed. They saw strength and grit. This resulted in Cheers, where she spent the whole 11-year run, spanning 275 episodes. She was never gone. Haida, her sister, contributed to the show's writing and production. Philip, their father, even made an appearance in more than 160 episodes. It went beyond a job. Family was involved. She didn't attempt to seem like it wasn't a huge deal after the program finished. It was the finest job she had ever had, she said. All of them thought about staying another year. Why not? When you receive a present each year, you accept it. As she said, Rhea's real life was as complex off-screen. It was at a little show in New York in 1971 that she first met DeVito. They immediately bonded, and in 1982, the year Cheers started, they were married. Then came Lucy, Grace, and Jay, 3 children. However, they split up in 2012, 30 years later. The majority anticipated a divorce. That never took place. They remain legally married, remain close, and continue to raise their grandchildren together as of 2025. Rhea once said that because the strain was removed after their split, their relationship really improved. They continue to visit one another, communicate frequently, and celebrate significant events together, such as the birth of their grandchild Sinclair in 2021 and another one that followed. They even still collaborate at Jersey Films, their film studio. Rhea is not the kind to go away without a fight. She continued to perform after Cheers. She appeared in the Mindy Project, starred in Pearl, and starred in movies including Matilda and Canadian Bacon. The final one. DeVito is the director. They did a fantastic job portraying Matilda's awful parents. She wasn't finished though. She shocked everyone in 2023 by portraying Ruth Handler, the woman who created Barbie, in the popular movie Barbie. In addition to that, it served as a reminder to everyone of her continued excellence. Additionally, Rhea authored the Auto Undercover children's book series, a total of 6 volumes full with hilarious and crazy experiences. Additionally, one of them was listed as one of the year's finest books by Child magazine. At the age of 77, she continues to work, write, and attend events. George left, had no intention of becoming a TV celebrity. His character, Norm Peterson, was meant to be simply another man on a seat when he initially entered the bar on Cheers. However, there was something about Wendt's portrayal of him, his easygoing demeanor, his flawless delivery, and his everyman charm, that made people fall in love with Norm. One of the most recognizable characters in comedy history, sprang from what began as a supporting part. It wasn't a joke every time he entered, and the bar shouted, "Norm." It turned into a custom. The majority of people were unaware of the amount of consideration that he and his co-star John Ratzenberger put into their parts. They assumed no one would laugh at the bizarre comedy they came up with, which they named Joke Obscura. However, it was successful. Norm wasn't only amusing, he influenced people's lives. Despite being nominated for 6 consecutive Emmy Awards, Wendt consistently lost. He made fun of it, but it ended up being one of those things that people remembered, that the person who had everyone laugh didn't get the prize. Not even the drink was as enjoyable as it seems. Wendt once claimed that salt was added to his beer to improve its froth. It was terrible. He would repeatedly drink it for scenes, and it caused his blood pressure to rise. He eventually discovered a trick. Only when the camera was really on him would he drink. You seldom see that type of behind-the-scenes stuff, but it demonstrates the amount of work that went into making Norm appear effortless. Wendt may have disappeared once Cheers ended, like so many others, trapped in the shadow of his most well-known part. However, he didn't. It was difficult at first. He was viewed as normal, and just Norm. However, he discovered an odd sort of peace with it, rather than resisting it. He discussed portraying a character who, like him, was only known for one role in a subsequent interview. That candor resonated. Understood what it was like to be caught in the past in the recollections of others. The health scare followed. Wendt had to withdraw from a large theatrical production in 2013 due to chest symptoms. It was serious. It served as a reminder to everyone, including himself, that life may change suddenly for someone who had always been the epitome of laid-back tranquility. He then began incorporating those concerns from real life into his characters, giving his performances a more nuanced quality. Wendt hasn't vanished, even in his 70s. He continues to work, continuing to appear in films and play new parts. His estimated net worth ranges from $25 million to $45 million. It's not bad for a man who used to watch TV while sitting at the end of a bar. Ratzenberger. John was just another actor looking for a break in the early 1980s. He felt that his audition for Cheers was a complete failure. He thought it was finished as he was leaving, but then he turned around and made a pitch. A frequent at the pub, he always had something unusual to say. On the spot, he provided an illustration of why the Bic pen omitted the H from bitch. It was audacious, unconventional, and successful. Cliff Clavin, the trivia-loving mailman who appeared on every season of Cheers, was born at that same time. It was instinctive, unplanned, and it completely altered the course of events. Many people thought Ratzenberger would lose his prominence when the Cheers ceased. Rather, he discovered something much more potent than celebrity: regularity. For Toy Story, Pixar gambled on him. He then turned into their fortunate charm. He appeared in every Pixar movie for 25 years in a row, from Mack the Truck to the monstrous snowman. Trying to find him in every new release became a game. His box office receipts reached the billions by 2019. The run abruptly came to an end. No explanation, no announcement. He just disappeared from the voice cast of Pixar. The reason why John Ratzenberger wasn't only interested in movies is still a mystery to many. He became an innovator and businessman in secret. He developed an environmentally friendly packaging product in 1989, using paper rather than plastic. He sold the business a few years later since it was so successful. Then he went digital, actually creating a system that directed users to websites using the names of celebrities. He traveled to American factories to film a show called Made in America while others sought Hollywood parts. He wished to demonstrate to others how things were constructed and why they were important. That goal developed into a whole movement. He gave $1 million to support the restoration of vocational skills in public education, plumbing, carpentry, and welding. He thought their positions were worth as much as anything in Hollywood. Nor did he only speak, he brought it to pass. Ratzenberger adapted to a more subdued existence away from the limelight. After 20 years of marriage and 2 children, he remarried in 2012. He relocated to a tiny island in Washington state after living in London for years, avoiding the Hollywood craze. Even when his views were criticized, he was outspoken about them and backed conservative candidates. However, he saw speaking up as an inherent aspect of his identity. Ali Kirsty. The strain was severe when Shelley Long quit Cheers. Kirsty entered the scene as Rebecca Howe, a character with a voice unlike anybody else's, who wasn't attempting to emulate Diane. She was intelligent, nervous, consumed with her work, and in private, a complete wreck. It was successful. She was loved by the audience, and she won an Emmy and a Golden Globe for her portrayal. Ali had hardly established herself before to Cheers. Her most well-known part was in Star Trek II, but Cheers put her in a whole other category. She went on to play more serious parts after the program, and even won another Emmy. She continued to alter herself while hosting her own sitcom Veronica's Closet. It wasn't always easy though. Ali was open about his struggles with weight gain. She made it into a television program. She then made a memoir out of it. A reality program follows. She shared her own struggles with the world, raw and unvarnished, and everything of her. She also had no qualms about voicing her opinions. Ali spoke out about politics when others in Hollywood remained silent. She backed Donald Trump. She maintained her position despite claiming it cost her jobs. She wasn't posing as someone else, whether or not people agreed with her. Then the shock hit. Her children revealed in late 2022 that Kirsty had passed away following a brief but fierce battle with colon cancer. She had kept it a secret. She said nothing. One of television's most enduring stars vanished in an instant. Woody Harrelson, 71. Following the death of a beloved character, Woody Harrelson was introduced as the silly new character on Cheers. Nobody knew what to anticipate from him at first. But then something occurred. Audiences were captivated by his naive charm and impeccable timing. That tiny, straightforward duty became a significant innovation. It wasn't simply Woody Boyd he was playing. People were getting unable to look away from him. He was already getting his feet wet in movies while he was still serving drinks on the show. It wasn't the big event, but his first was a football comedy starring Goldie Hawn. Later on, that happened. He took everyone by surprise when Cheers ended. He took a step back. His priorities shifted after becoming a parent, and acting temporarily suffered. However, Hollywood did not exactly embrace him when he attempted to return. He expected the parts to be waiting, but they weren't. He could have been devastated by that stillness, but it didn't. Rather, he took a huge chance. He abandoned his portrayal of a lovely person and played a serial murderer in Natural Born Killers, one of the most violent and unexpected portrayals anybody had ever seen. People were stunned. That was the idea. Woody Harrelson was more than just the amusing bartender all of a sudden. He was violent, erratic, and gifted in a way that made the industry take notice. He got a part a few years later that would lead to his first Oscar nomination, in The People vs. Larry Flynt, for portraying Larry Flynt. Any reservations vanished after that performance. He wasn't only acting, he was demonstrating that he was on par with the industry's top performers, and it continued after that. He became into a versatile actor who could play in everything from dark comedy to war tragedies, popular franchises, to independent favorites. The Hunger Games, Zombieland, 3 Billboards and The Messenger. Range was the meaning of his name. He took risks in his job, but his life was everything but peaceful when he wasn't in front of the camera. A drunken affair in London in 2002 that involved 3 ladies and 1 error that almost lost him. His marriage made headlines. For most, everything would have been gone. However, his longtime partner Laura showed some forgiveness rather than dismissing him, something most people wouldn't accept. During that same week, Woody got into a heated argument with a taxi driver and ended up in jail. Laura saved his bacon. She remained substantial, not merely present. He continues to surprise people nowadays. He featured in the heartwarming independent drama Suncoast in 2024, which revealed a gentler, more contemplative side of him. It struck a personal chord with the audience. However, he declined not 1 but 2 roles in the wildly successful television series, The White Lotus, just when some believed he could be transitioning into a more subdued phase. Contrary to popular belief, it had nothing to do with money. He followed his plan for the family's trip. Grammar, Kelsey. Following the conclusion of Cheers, Frasier went off. Kelsey wasn't just a part of a fantastic show all of a sudden, he represented one. However, underneath that refined cerebral exterior was a man enduring suffering that most people cannot fathom. His father was shot dead during a violent house invasion when he was just 13 years old. Years later, in one of the most heinous murders conceivable, his younger sister Karen was abducted and killed. The story didn't end there. In a terrible diving mishap, one of his half-brothers lost their lives while attempting to save the other. For one person, the loss was too much. Nevertheless, he persisted. He appeared to be in charge on the outside. Tony Awards and Emmy, and praise for the voice acting on The Simpsons. However, he was sliding within. His booze and drug abuse were so severe that other performers had to put on interventions. He had to clean up or lose everything after being caught, fined and punished. And he almost did for a time. Sometimes he was scarcely able to function. Then the cameras started rolling. He changed back to Frasier like a switch. It was nearly otherworldly. It wasn't much simpler in his personal life. Children trapped in the middle of 4 marriages, harsh divorces, and public scandals. He once divorced his 3rd wife and married a considerably younger lady 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. The headlines were harsh. Nevertheless, he continued to perform, work, and somehow find methods to change despite everything. He brought Frasier back in 2023. It wasn't a failure, but it didn't last long. It served as a reminder that he was still open to trying again, despite having worked in the industry for decades. His reconciliation with Ted Dansen, which ended a 30-year quiet, brought on by alcohol, animosity, and old scars, was even more unexpected. Fans would never have imagined the reunion may potentially result in new collaborations. Colasanto, Nicholas. There was more to Nicholas Colasanto than just his role as coach on Cheers. He was a guy who, just as his health was deteriorating, had overcome personal demons, survived combat, and ultimately found peace. He served in World War II before following a passion that brought him to Hollywood. He was born in Rhode Island in 1924 to Italian-American parents. The lengthy battle he had fought against drinking was hidden from the audience beneath his lovable, silly persona. He was almost wrecked by it. However, he became sober in 1976. Regretfully, the harm was already done. He never had the same heart again. By 1982, when the Cheers started, Colasanto was already considering retirement. Even though his health was rapidly deteriorating, he couldn't refuse the opportunity to be a coach. It is difficult to see the program without him, because of how passionately he portrayed the endearing but forgetful bartender. His weight decreased throughout the years, and the actors realized something was up. Nevertheless, he continued. He persisted on returning to work even after being admitted to the hospital in late 1984. Although he was losing his lines, nobody wanted to think that this was the end. He made a final appearance in a brief moment before the season ended, even though his final complete episode had already been taped. Nicholas passed away at home from a heart attack on February 12, 1985. He was just 61. It destroyed the Cheers family. His funeral was attended by hundreds. He passed away, yet his memory endured. Perlman, Philip. It wasn't until his later years that Philip Perlman became an actor. 1919 saw his birth in Poland. He had a modest life away from Hollywood, for the majority of his years working in the toy industry. However, destiny had other ideas. When Philip retired and relocated to Los Angeles, he made a casual visit to the Cheers set, where his daughter, Rhea Perlman, was already a star. Would it be possible for him to be an extra? Everything changed with that one inquiry. He was given a background role by the director, only a man at the bar. However, his popularity grew as more people watched him. Philip has a natural rhythm without any instruction. Haida, his daughter who worked on the show, claimed that he had a natural timing ability. That additional gradually grew erratic. He portrayed Phil, a barfly who steals scenes and cracks jokes. He ultimately made an appearance in 142 episodes. He was no longer only a supporting figure. His career continued once he became a part of the show's soul. He made appearances on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, appeared in Frasier, and acted in movies, alongside his son-in-law Danny DeVito. It was a surprising second life, full of love, joy, and late-blooming celebrity. From Poland to Hollywood, he died in 2015 at the age of 95. Philip Perlman was one of the most endearing second acts in show business history, appearing in everything from toys to television.